thank you both for such thought-provoking presentations. As I was listening to your remarks, I was struck by the many resonances and intersections in your work. Like, for instance, the fact that you both seem to be reflecting from a more relational, kind of post-humanist even perspective, where human life cannot be dissociated from non-human life, where everything is interconnected, right? And also how you both consider circulation as basic principle of human existence. In your case, you discuss that through the circulation of bodies, and in your case, you do it through what circulates within the body, which is a very nice juxtaposition, I think. And also the way in which both of you engage with how bodies are entangled with global politics or relations of colonial and post-colonial power. So those are just to mention a few things that I find that are intersecting both of your work here. So to begin the conversation, maybe I'll start by asking Max a question related to temporality and how you mentioned, or I was wondering if you could elaborate on the idea of temporality and how it extends the limits of the skin, or if you can elaborate on how do you understand the relation between temporality and the extended body that you were talking about?
Thanks for your question. Temporality, well, I think if what I agree on, both Achille and me, think about circulation as vital, let's say, for human existence, I would say that temporality is intrinsic to circulation, since if we think of circulation, well, a certain temporal lap is concluded, right, when you circulate, like when you... So it's an intrinsic temporal issue. I think that in terms of colonialism, just to get a bit back to what I was referring to, right? I never get tired of explaining that there's in Western discourse there's a big spatialization of the colonial phenomena, and in Western discourse there's a tendency to think about what is being occupied as the space of things, like the physical space, while I would like to stress the fact that exactly the relationalness you're talking about, the temporalities is what is being colonized as well, right? One is not separable one from the other. So we always, I think, need to necessarily think about temporality of is what I don't know how to say it. You know, it measures our existence in a way. That's what's very common. But all our practices, all our exercises of living, right, are bound to a temporal dimension. And the occupation of this temporality, the control of this temporality, is crucial to understand phenomena such as colonialism. So all our activities have been controlled, right? This is, and as Achille points out perfectly, it's about, you know, exactly the figuring out how, from today's perspective, how space and time are being controlled, right, through almost let's call it cybernetics of colonialism in a way, you know, right? There's a big network of understanding how space relates to time and how we are able to move through this relation. I'm not sure if I'm explaining.
That's good. Yeah, thank you. Achille, can I ask you, going back to the question of the bodies, the concept, the term of the body, which you speak about, and I guess it comes up here in general, like it's a bit too abstract, right? So it raises the question, which body are we talking about? And so I was wondering if you can maybe expand on how you think we can account for the gendered or racial contextual specificities of these bodies that we're trying to think in relation to the borders.
Mm-hmm. Yes, before we talk about that, I would just like to maybe contextualize a bit more the position from which I come to this these issues. I live in South Africa. South Africa, when you look at a map, it is really down there at the bottom end. And I mean, to come here, you have to cross the entire continent, and then part of Europe, and then turn left, and eventually land at JFK. It's a very long way. And then when you live in a place like Johannesburg, you have the feeling of carrying on top of your head the whole of the continent. I don't even mention the world at large. You also have the feeling that the world we live in is becoming smaller and smaller. It's becoming smaller and smaller, and so far, at least since colonialism and maybe even before, we haven't really found the proper way to share it. To share it among all of us humans, and to share it with other inhabitants of the planet, because we're not the only inhabitants of the planet. And therefore, that question of sharing the Earth and sharing the planet becomes absolutely crucial in our thinking about how we inhabit it. And we cannot inhabit it if we cannot move. Movement, circulation is a key element of our inhabitation of the world and our capacity to share it among humans and non-humans and all living entities. So that's the point of departure of the reflection on all of this. Of course, bodies, there are many different kinds of bodies. I mean, I don't want to go into racialized bodies because, in fact, they have paid a lot of the price. When you look at the histories of race or histories of racialization, they are deeply connected to histories of immobilization. They are connected deeply to histories of forced mobility. When mobility happens, it often happens forcefully. People move in chains. So the question is, how is it that we can create a world where we do no longer move in chains? And therefore, my interrogation of borders is part of a broader reflection on the kind of new nomos of the Earth. How is it that we share the Earth? How do we divide it? How do we partition it, but in such a way as to guarantee its durability? That's the perspective, if you want, since we're talking about the multiplication of perspectives. That's one of them.
Thank you, Achille. I see we are running a little bit out of time, but before we open it up to the audience, I was wondering if maybe you have some remarks for each other, or you have questions you'd like to pose to each other. Otherwise, we can just take questions from the audience.
I have lots of questions, but we'll deal with them around a glass of wine. Yeah.
Great meeting you, Achille.